The state of cybersecurity in the European Union. That's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from the headquarters at Onto we bring you Threat Talks. Let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me start by introducing my guest of the day. I'm really excited that he is here, Hans de Vries. He is the Chief Cybersecurity and Operational Officer at ENISA. We'll talk in a bit what ENISA is, and he is like a very seasoned guest for us. I mean, one thing I always remember is his work at the NCSC, and NCSC you can see as the Dutch version of the CISA, as we know in the United States. And when the Log4j disaster hit, it was one organization that was really good at finding all the OSINts, so all the IP addresses of attackers, everybody who was there, and the whole world used the GitHub repository of the NCSC. Here's the man responsible for that. Hans, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
So in your new role, we're going to talk about it in a second. How many countries have you been to in the last couple of months?
14.
14. So you must be talking to a lot of different people in a lot of different nations.
Yeah, that's part of my job, to actually make sure that what ENISA, the European Cybersecurity Organization, does is fitting for the member states to make sure that it is useful for them and that we can see what the next step's going to be.
Yeah, so because ENISA is at the, let's say, federal level, you might say, or a union level, so across all the countries, huh? And that's where you play a role in anything cybersecurity, more or less. Could you specify it a little?
ENISA is a European institution, so it's part of the European Commission, and we are there to help the member states create a high common cybersecurity level. So we are here to make sure that we coordinate and we advise the different member states of how they do their cybersecurity, and especially cross-border or with new regulations or with the new things like certification, but also incident reporting and crisis management. So we do the works to make sure that it's connected. It's not like an NCSC which really works with incidents and IOCs and things like that. We try to, because that's the nation's responsibility. So we have 27 member states to actually do that type of work. But they're there. We're here to coordinate that stuff to make sure that people understand what's at stake and how to address that as much as possible. And we work very much with those countries.
And try to get them aligned.
That's one of the parts, yeah.
That sounds like a challenge.
It's nice.
Yes.
Look, people come from different environments and different understandings. So aligning the thoughts is one part. Making sure that you understand why they have a different view is very important as well, because they might have some active thoughts that you didn't really think of, or some solutions. So you need to bring all those parts together. So we're like making sure that they understand what's at stake on different levels. So it's security mechanisms there are there as well. But we're trying to make sure that we're not operational. The member states are, and they are supported as much as possible.
Was there a big difference when you went from the local organization in the Netherlands to the European level?
Well, frankly, my NCSC when I left was about 300 people. And when I came to ENISA, it's about 130, 140. So it's much smaller. We have a very high expertise, and CCNL had as well. But the big difference is we don't run after incidents. That's done on the national level. But connecting the dots is definitely the thing I like, and ENISA is good at.
Okay, yeah. So and standardization, I guess, is a big thing. I mean, if we have companies in many different countries, and then if we all have to abide by different rules or different ways to report an incident, those kind of things, that's a thing that ENISA tries to streamline or advises on?
Yeah. What we try to do is advise, because we don't make the rules, but we advise them what is the best setup for rules and reporting facilities. So incident reporting, what are the targets that needs to be met? What kind of information do you need? In what kind of taxonomy level do we use? Things like that. We give some advice. We produce the documents together with the different member states. And in the end, because of a lengthy process, in the end, it's accepted. And therefore, it becomes the regulation that we all use. And like GDPR, probably the impact will be bigger than only Europe.
That's interesting. Yeah, because GDPR is one of the, at least from the European perspective, a success story, right? I mean, it's the rules that the Europeans made, But now, I mean, in America, everyone has a GDPR compatible cloud for Microsoft, for example. That's the
If you look at, let's say, the bigger impact, we have about 375 million people that you can sell products to. So it's a huge market. And we are going to produce the rules and regulations in order to sell on that market. That's going to be the Cyber Resilience Act, which comes into play within a few years. And with the NIS2 reporting and incident reporting and crisis management processes, we also set the bar on how to do that. Of course, we try to harmonize as much with other countries because cyber has no borders. So you need to be aware of that in international organizations to deal with, let's say, 27 different member states with different mechanisms to report and different sorts of information. That's really cruelty. So we're trying to organize and harmonize as much as possible. But still, we need to deal with the 27 member states that each have their own not only environment, also thinking about what type of information is needed to deal with incidents. So it's laborious, but definitely needed for everyone.
But it's amazing work for all the. I mean, if you're a company in the United States and trying to sell into Europe,
yeah, true.
If you weren't there, imagine the. Right?
Well, we're not doing all the work, but we're definitely coordinating the work to make sure that that it's most effective as possible. And it's still work in progress.
You are a modest man indeed. So what if there was today a big incident happening? What would the ENISA do to help? So say there's a big attack on Europe or a member state. What's the role?
The good thing is that we have a lot of communities and also formalized communities that are connecting the different member states. And there are a few that really that stand out. The first, we call it the CSIRT network, which is the 27 member states with the different CSIRT, the computer emergency response teams. They are connected into a network, and ENISA plays the secretariat role. So it connects the dots, it helps the member state to understand what's happening. So we talk about incidents on that level to make sure that everyone understands what's at play. So if there is a big incident, that's the first place where people would share knowledge and understanding, but also solutions for that. The second part is it's called Cyclone, and Cyclone is a communication level with all the directors who are responsible in their countries for cybersecurity crisis management process. So in the Netherlands would be the NCTV, the National Coordinator on Terrorism and Safety, who plays their role together with the NCCNL.
And how difficult is this thing? Because what you're talking about, it's something that in cybersecurity is always a problem. People talking to each other in different, and this is across borders. Huh? I mean, there needs to be a level of trust there, and a level of. Or
the interesting part is that we know each other. And we meet regularly in order. So during peacetime, you need to know in peacetime who is your colleague that you need to work on in wartime. So we have meetings. So the next one's going to be in Munich within a few weeks again with the directors and Cyclone officers. We have different levels. So there is a lot of trust that when the shit hits the fan, that we need to talk with each other, and we're definitely going to make everyone understand that we need to do like that. Yes, there are different levels of security. If it's more Intel-based, it's harder to share than it's more the CSIRT network, and everyone understands who's working in this field, understand that there are several levels and tell or not tell.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's always if a national security of a member state feels attacked somehow, they want to share this with a little. As other nations as possible, probably, but that's not the big thing, right? I mean, the big numbers are shareable information.
Look, if you saw with Log4j, the most important part is that we all know that something's happening, but also what's safe enough to use. So you need cooperation on that level. And my former country, well, it's not still my country, but my former organization I worked for was really understanding of how that worked. Log4j and others. And the moment we can do that on a European level, it would be great. So there is a lot to do, especially with cyber diplomacy, because when you know that you're being attacked, the first thing, of course, is what's it coming from, and not so much who did it, but how to stop it and how to circumvent to make sure that you have bypasses and restore and be able to restore from the situation. But after, well, of course, law enforcement comes in, cyber diplomacy comes in. So you need to have the right connections in order to decide up until the moment in the council to understand what's going to be the case. Are we going to indict people from attribution? That's the part that ENISA doesn't play, because we are looking at cybersecurity techniques and processes, but the more policy and law enforcement part is not our thing.
How difficult is it to get the to spread the regulations or the advisories or the legislation throughout the countries in the EU? Because there's always this ratification process that people always hear about. Is that
well? If you talk about Brussels and Brussels regulation, there are two types. There is a regulation and there is an act. A regulation means it needs to be transposed into their national environment, meaning 27 different versions of the same basis.
They translate the templates.
Yes,
more or
they
less.
have. Yeah, but they have to make sure that it really fits their unique situation. So the NIS2, the one who's about crisis and critical infrastructure coordination, and the rules that needs to be applied there, they need to impose that into their own environment, which is laborious and difficult. So you can see that I don't really have count of all of them, but let's say 10 out of 27 or 15 out of 27 have done all the work, and some others will finish it before the end of the year, and some will finish it in Q1, and the Netherlands will be Q3. So it's difficult to actually do that. Others, like acts, like the AI Act or Data Act or a DORA or a Netcode, they're all act, meaning right there, implementable within the, let's say, the Dutch environment.
And why would Brussels decide to do it through an act or through a regulation that need to be ratified? Is there a reason for that?
I think my personal environment is that it came because 5 or 6 years ago when we started the whole NIS2, there was still a big difference about how to do this and how to implement that, and so they wanted to have more control. I think that
so an act is really a powerful thing, and maybe that's not always applicable. So then you need to go to a longer, more tailor-made, but in the end better process.
Well, one of the things that you see with when you're talking about critical infrastructure, it might depend on what you think is critical infrastructure. In the Netherlands, water management is very critical.
My house is like 10 feet below sea level. So
but Austria might not have such an issue with that because there is a big difference there. Yeah. So you see that making
whereas
sure
AI is the same for everyone.
Yeah, it is.
It makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, and then of course, change is needed then, right? This new act is there, and then you need to impose it on someone else, and then the Brussels government gets to the German or the Dutch government and say, hey, this is what you need to change, and do they like that?
Well, the first thing is that there is a very lengthy process to actually create the law, the regulation. So that does not come overnight. So it takes months, years to actually do that, and there is some good fruition. There is good understanding why it needs to take so long, because you really need to adapt to the new thinking and actually get things to get ahead. So creating a law, it's the same in the Netherlands. It's the same in Europe. It takes years to actually create go to that level. So now we have the NIS2. The NIS3 will be 8 years left. Something like that, because it takes a lot of time. We're still in the implementing phase, so that will come much later. But
you're
what you
an expert in thinking ahead. Then
we have to. Yeah. One of the things that we're currently working on is the health environment. I mean, von der Leyen mentioned that she wants to focus on the first 100 days on how to help and get the health environment to a higher cyber state. Organizations, and ENISA plays a big role in organizing that. Will play a big role in organizing that.
Yeah, so then it would be indeed the NIS3 or the NIS2 would be also applicable to healthcare. That's the kind of things that we could expect then.
Well, the NIS2 is already applicable to healthcare to a certain environment. But what you do see is that the moment a hospital is hit, people die, right? And that's different from many other of the sectors. Yeah. So it is understood that the health sector needs support. You also see that there's a lot of, let's say, old stuff there that's hardly updatable anymore. So we need to focus on that as well.
Yeah, clear. Yeah. Shall we talk about that report that ENISA brought out end of last year about the state in 2024? There's a couple of things in there that, and one of the things that was noted there is the geopolitical situation. And can you?
Well, if you look at the report itself, it shows what's the state on cybersecurity on a European level. So everyone added together. We didn't do a sub-dive per country because that's always very sensitive. But what you do see is that we have a 69% out of 100%. So we get a mere 7 out of 10, which is a B, if you would call it the United States perspective, a B minus, perhaps even. But it's still a level where you can survive if something bad is happening. Should we go to an A++? Of course we do, but that takes a lot of time, effort, and understanding as well. Yeah. And it's not only about governments, right? It's about industry specifically all. I still have a lot of discussion where I see that industry does not really understand that it's really a CEO perspective focus. We call that Chefsache in German. It's really a thing that your company depends on that. And it's not an IT thing. It's a big part of your future, and especially when you start using AI and you are a part of a supply chain, and you have a problem. You have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
and a country will have a problem
that boards do not realize enough how important it is to take this all seriously.
It has definitely grown better than let's say 2 years ago, but there's still a lot to do. Still a lot to do to make them understand. Yeah. It's not so sometimes you really see that profit is all. Well, that depends, because if you cannot make the service anymore and therefore you hit on the society because your service was really essential for that, you might have to rethink why you are giving those type of services.
So what you're advocating then is, like in food, there's food regulations, the Food Health Act, and there is buildings need to be safe, aviation, planes need to be really safe and all that. I mean, those are high standards that we hold in most parts of the world, but particularly in Europe is quite famous for it. Should cybersecurity or digital safety be up there with those?
Oh, yeah. We talk both with the United States, CISA and us. We're talking about cybersecurity by design, cybersecurity by default, but also from a procurement mechanism thinking cybersecurity by demand. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I will say is that the S in IoT stands for security. It's not there.
Yeah.
So on the basic level, it will be omitted because it's too expensive, too difficult, etc. But then we are being overloaded with all kinds of IP cameras that have no safety, fixed passwords, and being massively used for DDoS attacks.
Electrical cars filled with cameras that are connected to clouds in different parts of the world, those kind of things.
I'm not an expert on that, but I would expect that those organizations really understand that cybersecurity should be an integral part of that. But if you look at from a more lower level, all the IoT stuff, why do you need to put a kettle on the internet? Yeah. Why is it needed? So why do produce the bloody thing?
Yeah.
It's stupid. So and it creates really incidents.
It's like a voluntary dependency that you implement that doesn't really bring a lot.
Yeah. Well,
probably because of the big tech. That's what you always hear.
You're able to make it, but is it wise to do so? That's always a big question.
Well, from the perspective of a big tech company, it's great to know exactly who is using your product and when and how fast they abandon it. I mean, the data is the oil. Huh?
Come on, a kettle to boil water. You're standing next to it. Come on.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. but the practice is different. Is this what the government should be worried about and have regulations on that? This kind of thing should, for example, if you make a kettle online, you have to explain why, something like that, or be very. Is that?
That's not my focus. It's just an example of how people have moved away from the actual needed to the obviously strange from my perspective. Yeah. So that's a personal opinion. But what you do see from the Cyber Resilience Act, the CRA, we will focus on the cybersecurity aspects of products before they can enter the market. Mm-hmm. So that will come within a few years. And it might sound like burden, but it's actually an essential part to make sure that our digital environments are safe, stay safe, and therefore our democracy is not at stake, because the impact can be huge.
Yeah. What's your biggest fear when we're talking about European security? What should we be worried about?
I think my biggest fear is that people still don't understand that a large cybersecurity incident can definitely create havoc on your democracy.
Your democracy.
We have
That's the foundation of our society.
It's the foundation of our society. It is currently being misused by bad actors to actually create havoc. You see the sea cables being cut. You see democracies from elections where social media is definitely misused to influence the mind and therefore the voting of people. It's really...
there's no single truth source anymore.
Well, that's my alternate truth. They call it. I really don't really understand what that means. But what I do see is that the influence of the mind through social media is becoming much bigger and very hard to tackle. Because
many people these days believe a Facebook message of their neighbor more than the national left-wing.
Well, so what you say, I don't have any proof of that, but it's definitely so that if you see a message 100 times during a day, you get influenced by that.
How can we? Is there a way?
And it's not by the way, it's not a cybersecurity issue, right? This is misinformation. This is manipulation of thoughts and things like that. ENISA doesn't focus on that at all. So we really work on IT systems, and we're working, for instance, on the digital wallets that will be able to combine the different European wallets that are already out there in Poland, Greece, other countries working on that. We're trying to make sure that
safeguard the money.
Not so much the money, but that if you have a digital wallet with your passport, driver's license, and all that type of stuff are safe in itself and also introducible between the different countries. So we're going to do a certification on that. So that's another part of where ENISA is focusing on. But so what you see is that if you look at the threats, DDoS, ransomware, they're definitely big ones. But supply chain is another part. We are so dependent on, let's say, the IT mechanism to work. You've seen it with CrowdStrike. Someone makes a mistake, whether it's a dumb or a good, it doesn't really matter. Someone makes a mistake. There is no bad actor involved. The impact was huge.
Yeah, we don't even need a hacker to go down sometimes.
No, we don't need...
we did an episode on that, and that was actually very simple things that could have avoided a lot of the havoc, because one of the things is they pushed the update and you couldn't schedule those. So they published a new update, and then all the systems at the same time were updated. And typically, what we do here in practice for customers, especially in critical infrastructure and also larger organizations, first you roll out the patch in a few systems, so you know if it breaks down, and then after a day or so you do the rest, right? And that wasn't the issue. It actually improved it now, because now it's possible with CrowdStrike. But
there was a big discussion on I think it was a system that was run by the military to do the communication, and you have to be aware that that system ran flawlessly for 30 years.
Wow!
And then we had one incident that there was a problem, and then no flights in Eindhoven, etc. But if you look at from, let's say, the performance state, it's an excellent system. So just depends on what you do, and people make mistakes. So we have to make sure that in the process we can overcome that. But it's not always the case that when something seems broken, that we have to change everything right after. No. With that system, it was very clear. It was running for 30 years perfectly.
And then endpoint protection in this case, it's also a very complex system, and the more complexity, the more room for error, and therefore eventually will.
It's still all risk based.
What about the critical infrastructure? There's if you're talking about supply chain, for example, it can be difficult. We had V10s in Threat Talks last year about this. So they need to use a lot of cloud services, suppliers, and all that. And they supply the water in a large part of the Netherlands. Of course, it's crucial that they stay in business.
Yep.
So supply chain for them is really a really important thing. It's a hard thing, right? Is it?
Well, you have to know your suppliers, and you have to have a good relationship with your suppliers. It's not a legal It's not only a legal country, but also cooperation. So you need to understand that the dependencies for the service that you get are secure and that if you're able to help each other, ASML, for instance, they have about 5,000 different suppliers, and they have a whole program to help the suppliers, the big ones, to make them sure that they're safe as well, which is great. I mean, instead of that you say you have a legal problem if you have an issue, no. How can I help you to make sure that you're just as secure as I am?
But that's great. That's actually security, the wish to be secure driven instead of compliance driven.
And it's also large helps small. It also means that you're really understanding that your supply chain is really important for everything you do. It's not only the thing that you do, but also how your companies are within the market space to actually make sure that the services are being rendered and possible and safe as well.
Is practice something that you would advocate? For example, I never practice that my electricity is down for 2 days at home. Should I?
Yes.
Personally.
Do you have the safety bucket where, let's say, some water in, so the safety thing that the Dutch government was talking about?
Yeah.
To make sure that you have something where matches are insecure, that you have a radio that you can do things like that. Well, you should.
Yeah.
Because you have to prepare for the bad moments. You might not need it, but you need to practice that. For companies, if you haven't practiced paying, let me put it differently. If you haven't practiced crisis management where you have been hacked and you have to talk with the media, you'll find out how difficult it is. So you have to practice that. And you all see that you have to not only practice it once, you have to practice it
over and over again.
Over and over again.
Like a fire drill.
It is like a fire drill. So we do fire drills. We do health checks. The ABO thinks so that when there is someone broke a leg because he fell off a stairs, that we practice that as well. And we don't do any cyber part, which is crazy because we are all fully dependent on the whole IT department mechanism.
But how do you practice, for example, say that 70% of our solar panels is hacked and someone just shuts them down all at the same time in the middle of the day on a sunny day. I don't know, that in a sunny day, I think 70-80% of all the electricity comes from solar panels, I believe. Huh? That's a big impact. Huh? How do you practice that?
Well, it's more for the, let's say, the VTENs and the energy providers to actually look at that risk and calculate how big that risk is and how do you check that, etc. And there are probably hackers that already have seen that some of those portals are too open and they will be warned about that. So
yeah, there's a reason I make this example. I'm personally quite worried about this actually. If we shut down all the panels and then open it up and then every 15 minutes we alternate or so, I don't know what that.
Well, you can use the panels for that. You can use the Tesla for that, or any other electrical vehicle. So there are different levels of that. But I think that risk is well understood. But people need to exercise this. We did a large exercise this year with I think it was 33 countries, so even more than only Europe. On a crisis management process, we were having 1,500 active participants, which is really a big accident.
That's a lot, yeah.
Test case, which was really interesting. Many
Can you explain a little bit what kind of things were done there?
Well, we're focusing on energy, we're focusing on banking, we're focusing on health, we're focusing on cyber supply chain, things like that, misinformation, the lot.
What do you do then? Like you hire actors or bring systems in test environments down, or what?
Well, we have, let's say, a testing facility. We call it the Blue Room that we use for that. And we build whole scenarios, and we're making sure that, in this case, from a European perspective, we had an incident on so many levels, but for the play itself, let's say Germany needed to find part A and then share it with the Netherlands, who could then find part B. So if there was no sharing, there was no solution. So sharing is caring is definitely part of that exercise.
Oh, so in all those communities you talked about, they all participate, and then you test whether they actually in a stressful situation actually are able to share.
Yeah, and what you see is that we have so much talent in Europe to actually deal with this, that sometimes you have to have extra parts of the scenarios to make sure that it all works. We have players in each country that actually holds part of that exercise itself. So some countries play big, so they are in for the full Monty, and others just do a part of that, which is okay because it all depends on what the country wants.
Yeah. On that subject, could you explain? I mean, the European Union is there, but that's also expanding. Is that? I can imagine there's different levels of involvement of different member states. And so how does that work? For example, if there's a couple of countries that are to be added to the European Union, are those also on your radar?
Yes, they are. Not so long ago, I was in Kosovo talking with the minister about the creation of a national cybersecurity center, and they were having some questions, and they were already working on that. So I was able to give them some advice on that process. So we are focusing on the Western Balkans, 6 countries. Some are more advanced than others. We'll see how that goes, because there's a lot of things that needs to be taken care of before you enter the European Union. So that's a lengthy process, but they definitely focus on the EU legislation and the different ways of working. We have a very good cooperation to help Ukraine if possible. So there are definitely things. Not so long ago, I was in Tallinn, that's one of the 14, to talk with EU ambassadors from all over the world, talking about crisis management in Europe. How is it done? So it's a really interesting prospect.
How do we score on a global level as Europe? I don't know if you're allowed to say something about or have data on that.
It's very hard to find comparable mechanisms. To really, what we do see is that we understand what's at stake on different levels. So if you talk about intelligence, if you talk about law enforcement, if you talk about CSIRT levels and policy, we definitely understand that. But there are also, we call it bad actors. You can find out who they are, who wants to influence that and wants to either do spying or interrupting or taking forward positions on IT systems. So we are very much aware of that. Do we find them all? Probably not. That's definitely on the member states, because we don't do that type of work. But if there is, it needs to be a warning heeded.
You're amplifying all the individuals' works in amazing way. That is the spirit of the cyber community. At least that's what we preach. We do share a lot.
I'm definitely that type. If I can help to make sure that everyone understands what the issue is, I'm there.
Is there anything that that you would want from CISAs, from companies that you already mentioned? It cannot have attention enough at the board level that cybersecurity should be like this first-class citizen in the whole security safety realm, next to food safety and fire safety and all that. Is there anything that companies can do to help move your mission forward?
Well, we have a lot of public-private partnerships, we call that, working together. So it's not only a Dutch environment, but you have ISACs, Information Sharing Analysis Centers on several levels as well, United States as well. So I'm very positive advocate for that type of cooperation. I do think that cybersecurity is something we shouldn't compete on. Also, we've been in business, so try to get the sector together to make sure that they all understand what the issue is, because at first it might, let's say, hit organization A, but not so long after it will hit organization B. You could have been helped, because next time it might be the other way around. So you need each other for this. It's an external problem. We need to focus on that. But it's only a big external problem where you have not done your homework in your own environment. So if you are not using two-factor authentication, you're stupid.
I fully agree.
And if you not have, let's say, different levels, and are you not making sure that the IT operator is not using his private environment to also do maintenance on systems? No, they're two separate environments. And two separate phones to make sure that they log on. So split that part. Yeah, it's really important. Yeah. And those are the 10 basic facts that you actually need to do.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of very tangible things that everybody should do then. And
it's not being done everyone. So my focus would be for the IT manager, the CISO, is have you taken the 10 basic steps? Is there awareness at the CEO level and the board level and the oversight committee that this is definitely number one priority, get right before you can do your services? Because if it's not done right, you have no services. It's really simple.
Let's put those 10 things in the show notes.
You could do that.
Yeah, let's do that. And that's a good starting point, maybe. Another thing I'd like to briefly explore with you is the relationship between the Europe and United States. There's probably of all the. Every cyber diplomacy talks to everybody, of course, in the world. But are there any things that we can learn from America, or that United States of America, or the other way around in your line of work? Is there? Because you. If I would summarize what you say, it is work together.
Oh, definitely.
Right? And
harmonize as much as possible.
Yeah. So, and I can imagine that that is not just within the borders of the European Union itself, but it also could expand to our closest allies.
Well, we have a very good relationship with UK, even though they stepped out through the Brexit. On, let's say, understanding what needs to be done, we are on the same understanding level. We have a very good cooperation with CISA. We have a working relationship with them. So if there are questions or even working possibilities to create a combined report, why not? So we have very good relationships with both European organization, commercial entities, but also from the United States to actually make sure that we understand what's at stake. We can go abroad, Singapore, United States, Japan. We need to reach out to those. And we used to do that from the NCCNL, so we would follow the sun because Japan might see it first. Yeah. And then, so you need to make sure that you're aligned with the stars, we call it. And that's really one of the fun things that's still the stake. Not so long ago, I was at the WEF, the World Economic Forum, where we could meet with both industry and government, talking on real high level about what can we do to cooperate. And those are the things that really give me spice and give me fun in the work we do, because it matters.
Yeah, there's so much to do, so much being done already, and it's so important.
It is.
Well, thank you very much. Keep up this good work, please. In the end, as I see it, as a citizen, it may seem far away, ENISA, to me, but as I've come to learn in this conversation, what you do translates into much better, powerful local government, much more powerful organizations locally. So, so in the end, my phone should be safer, and maybe I shouldn't worry too much about my solar panels getting hacked then.
Well, we try to do our best, and if we make sure that Europe the next day is a little bit more safe on cybersecurity, we're having a good day.
Well, that sounds like a great mission. Thank you very much, Hans de Vries.
You're welcome.
And to our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard today, please like this video or this podcast. It helps us spread the word further. While you're in that section of your app, also click the subscribe button, because that means that next week you'll get the next episode, and you can enjoy that as well. Thank you very much. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.